Hello and welcome to the Luv Doc podcast.
Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into a situation that might hit close to home?
Ooh, sounds intriguing.
Well, today we're talking about something that I think a lot of people struggle with, that age-old dilemma, the one with the messy house. And maybe a partner who doesn't quite share your passion for, well, tidying up.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely seen that play out in a few relationships.
And that's exactly what led us to this week's source material. We're taking a deep dive into an advice column, a letter sent to the Luv Doc.
The Luv Doc. Always a fun read. And usually pretty insightful, too.
Exactly. If you're not familiar, the Luv Doc is known for, well, let's say, a very direct and often hilarious approach to relationship advice.
Definitely doesn't shy away from tough love.
Not at all. So in this particular letter, we meet a reader who calls himself the fake perfect housewife.
Catchy name.
Right. So this fake perfect housewife, she lays out her situation. She and her husband, both busy professionals, they live in a bit of a lived-in environment.
Lived in. I think we've all been there at some point.
Oh, absolutely. And she's really been wanting to hire a housekeeper, just to kind of get a handle on things.
Makes sense, especially with busy schedules.
Right. But here's the catch. Her husband is completely against it.
Oh, that's got to be frustrating.
It is. And it's not even about the money. He says hiring help is like, he finds it shameful.
Shameful.
Yeah. He apparently got this idea from his mother, who believes that, taking care of your home is your own responsibility and all that.
Yeah, the classic mother-in-law influence.
Exactly. And on top of that, he says he's just not comfortable with strangers being in their house.
Interesting. So his wife taking care of everything is fine, but someone getting paid to do it is where he draws the line.
It's a little strange, right?
Yeah. It definitely sounds like there's more to this than just like a preference for doing things himself.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And luckily, the Luv Doc picks up on this too. They see right through to the heart of the matter. They say the real issue here isn't about cleaning at all. It's about, a power imbalance.
Makes you think, like whose time and energy is actually valued in this relationship?
Totally. And it is interesting, right? The Luv Doc points out that even if the husband isn't intentionally trying to, exert control or anything, it's the fact that he's not really contributing equally and just sort of relying on his mom's opinion. That's what creates this dynamic.
Yeah. Right.
Where his comfort is prioritized over hers. Have you ever encountered that? I mean, not necessarily about cleaning, but just where like an unspoken expectation led to, some resentment or feeling kind of undervalued.
Yeah.
All the time. And you know what I love about the Luv Doc? They don't beat around the bush. They just come right out and tell the fake perfect housewife to train her husband.
Okay, train her husband. That's pretty direct.
Oh, yeah. But hold on. Before you imagine dog whistles and treats involved, let's unpack what the Luv Doc actually means here.
Right, because I'm pretty sure we're not advocating for like actual obedience training here.
Exactly. But there's a good point hidden in that colorful language. What the Luv Doc is really getting at is the importance of setting boundaries and communicating openly. It's like, think about it. If you were teaching a puppy a new trick, you wouldn't just hope they figure it out, right?
No, you'd use positive reinforcement and make your instructions clear.
Exactly. And relationships, they kind of work the same way sometimes.
Yeah.
We need to be upfront about what we need and expect. It's more about like helping each other be better partners, not about punishing each other or anything.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, it's a good one, right? So instead of just silently stewing over it, the Luv Doc is basically encouraging the wife to say something like, hey, keeping this place clean, it's important to me. And I need your help. Maybe we can explore some different solutions together,
I like that approach. It makes the partner part of the solution instead of, the problem.
Right. And on that note, the Luv Doc does offer a pretty interesting compromise. They suggest that the wife could offer to hire cleaners.
How would that work?
Well, the idea is that it kind of shows that she's willing to put in the effort, right? Both financially and emotionally. And it sort of puts the ball back in the husband's court, to see if he's truly opposed to the idea of outside help or if it's more about, holding on to a certain level of control.
That's a really interesting point. And you know what? Sometimes even small acts of, let's call it rebellion, like our letter writer hiring cleaners behind her husband's back, it can actually be what sparks these important conversations.
You think so?
I do. It might not be ideal, but sometimes it forces those deeper issues to surface, the ones that need to be addressed.
That's true. But at the same time, the Luv Doc does caution against dishonesty. as a long-term solution.
Of course. It's not about being sneaky.
So now we're faced with the honesty dilemma. The lead writer feels guilty about hiring those cleaners behind her husband's back. And I can understand why. It's a tough spot to be in.
Definitely. So what are your initial thoughts on this situation? What stands out to you the most?
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Like, you want a clean house, but you don't want to cause a bigger problem by being dishonest.
It is tricky. It's like, those little acts of rebellion, sometimes they can really backfire.
Totally. So then how do you build that solid foundation when it comes to chores and responsibilities? Seems like we're talking about something bigger than just who scrubs the toilet.
Exactly. You're getting at something really important here. It's about the emotional labor that goes into running a household, right? And that often goes unseen. It's like, who's keeping track of the grocery list? Who's remembering those birthdays or appointments? Who's making sure there are always clean towels? All those little things.
It really is a lot, like that constant mental load of making sure everything runs smoothly.
Yeah.
And so often it's just taken for granted.
Absolutely. And, studies have actually shown that this burden, it disproportionately falls on women, even in relationships where both partners work outside the home. So on top of everything else, it's like having a whole other job, but without, the paycheck.
Wow, that's a good point. So in our listener's situation, even if her husband does help out with some of the actual cleaning, it's possible that he's not really seeing that mental effort, right? The one that she's putting into managing everything.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. And that's why, that open and honest communication is just so important. It's less about keeping score and more about just understanding, helping each other see all of that invisible work that's happening.
Makes sense. So then how do you actually do that? Start those conversations without it becoming, a blame game.
Well, I think the first step is to make sure you're both in a space where you can actually talk openly, right? So, put the phones away, find a quiet time, and really approach it from a place of trying to understand and find a compromise.
So instead of saying something like, you never help out around here, maybe you could say something like, hey, I've been feeling a little overwhelmed with all the household stuff lately, and I was hoping we could talk about how to maybe share the load a bit more evenly.
Exactly. And be specific, Instead of just saying you need to help more, try, hey, it would be a huge help if you could take over grocery shopping and meal planning this week.
Oh, that's good. So it's more about working together and less about pointing fingers. And that actually ties back to what the Luv Doc was saying, right? About training. It's not about one person being in charge or anything. It's about collaborating and creating those new habits and expectations together.
Right. And it's a process. It's not just a one-time conversation and everything's fixed. It's about ongoing communication, and constantly readjusting as things change.
And sometimes maybe that means getting a little outside help. Like the Luv Doc said, offering to hire a cleaner, it could be a great way to just take some of the pressure off. Plus, it shows your partner that you're serious about finding a solution that works for both of you.
Absolutely. It takes away that feeling of having to do it all perfectly yourselves, Let's be real, we all have different standards of cleanliness, and that's fine. But when those differences start causing tension, well, maybe it's time to consider some backup.
That's a good point. And think about the time and energy you could get back by not constantly stressing about a messy house. That's more time to do the things you enjoy together.
Exactly. It's an investment, right, in your relationship and in creating a home environment that feels good for both of you.
So maybe the question isn't so much to clean or not to clean, but more like, how can we create a home that reflects our shared values and priorities?
I love that. It really is about looking beyond the surface mess and building that strong foundation of communication, respect, and shared responsibility.
It's kind of funny, right? We started talking about cleaning, and somehow we've ended up on this deep dive into communication and compromise.
And what it really means to, build a life together.
Exactly. So as we wrap things up here, let's go back to that original question from our listener. To clean or not to clean? We've covered a lot of ground here. We had the Luv Doc's pretty blunt advice. Then we talked about emotional labor and, just how important it is to really communicate openly with your partner. What are your final thoughts? What should our listeners take away from all of this?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that there's no magic formula, right? Every relationship is different, and what works for one couple might not work for another. But no matter what, you need that open communication and mutual respect and that willingness to compromise. Those are the foundations.
Yeah, that makes sense. And thinking back to the Luv Doc's advice, that whole train your husband thing, it might have sounded a little extreme at first, But it really comes down to being clear about those expectations and, working together to build those healthier habits, being proactive instead of just letting resentment build up.
Exactly. And it's not about punishment, It's about working as a team, encouraging each other, and being patient. I mean, just like you wouldn't expect a puppy to learn a new trick overnight, it takes time to change those ingrained habits.
Oh, that's a good point. And sometimes it takes getting creative, right? To find solutions that really work for both people. Maybe it is hiring a cleaner.
Right.
Or maybe you divide those chores based on, what each of you actually enjoys doing, or at least tolerates.
Yeah.
Or even just setting aside some specific cleaning time each week and tackling it together.
Yeah. The important thing is to find what feels fair and sustainable, and that might take a little trial and error, some honest conversations, and honestly, probably a few laughs along the way. Because relationships, they're messy. Life is messy. And sometimes our homes are just going to be messy too.
Ain't that the truth? But hey, if you can learn to navigate all that mess together, with an open mind and a willingness to compromise, I think that's when the real magic happens.
I completely agree. And who knows, maybe by tackling those dust bunnies together, you'll actually uncover some hidden strength in your relationship, build an even deeper connection.
I love that. So to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you some new ways to think about your own cleaning conundrums. And remember, it's not really just about a spotless house, is it? It's about creating a home that feels like a safe space, somewhere you can both relax and recharge and, connect on a deeper level.
And if all else fails, just remember what the Luv Doc said. A little humor can go a long way.
Such good advice. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time for another exploration into the messy, complicated, and totally fascinating world of relationships.
To read the column that spawned this podcast, go to austinchronicle.com/columns/the Luv Doc. There are probably worse things to do with your time, right?